In 1857 Texas, a mother-as heartbreak turned into one of the most chilling acts of vengeance ever whispered through the plantations. Cora had lost her son, torn from her arms by slavery's cruel hand, and she would not forgive. What followed was unimaginable. Texas in the 1850s was a land expanding westward, full of cotton fields and cattle ranches. Wealth grew quickly here, but always on the backs of enslaved labor. In these fields, Cora lived her days, not as a woman with choices, but as property under the control of a master who viewed her only as labor, as profit, as something less than human. Cora's life was marked by endless toil. She worked in the quarters and the fields, caring not only for the land, but also for the white household that claimed to own her. Yet through all of this suffering, she clung to one light: her young son. For enslaved mothers, children were not just family. They were lifelines. Fragile threads of hope that gave meaning in a world designed to strip all dignity away. But hope in slavery was dangerous, fragile, and easily shattered. Cora's master, like many of his kind, viewed enslaved children not as human souls but as assets. And when debts pressed or profit beckoned, he sold them, tearing children from mothers without hesitation. That day came for Cora. Her son, the child she had carried, birthed, and nurtured with every ounce of love she had left, was taken from her arms, sold, gone. His cries echoed as he was dragged away, and her screams of protest went unanswered. The fields that once carried his laughter fell silent. Cora's world collapsed. Something inside her broke, and yet something else was born. A fire, slow and consuming, that no whip could extinguish. She would not forgive. She would not forget. Every day after her son was sold, Cora lived in torment. She walked past the quarters where he had once played, and silence cut her deeper than any lash. She worked in the fields with her body, but her mind was consumed by grief. Nights were the worst. Lying on the dirt floor of her cabin, hearing phantom cries, feeling the emptiness where her child once slept. The master, indifferent to her loss, continued his cruelty. He mocked her grief, dismissed her tears, and reminded her that she had no claim to her own child. To him, it was just business. To her, it was murder of the soul. Something hardened in Cora. The other enslaved noticed the change. The silence in her eyes, the weight in her steps. She no longer begged. She no longer pleaded. She watched. She waited. She began to study the master, his habits, his movements through the plantation. She knew when he drank heavily, when he slept deeply, when he left doors unlocked. She noticed the supplies around her. Tools, blades, oil, kindling. In her grief, her eyes sharpened. The plantation that once looked like a prison now looked like a weapon waiting to be turned against its jailer. Weeks turned into months! But grief does not fade when the wound is carved into a mother's heart. Instead, it deepens until only one thing can answer it: vengeance. For Cora, Easter had no meaning. Christmas, no joy. But in 1857, she made her own holy day. One that would be remembered in terror. The night was humid, the air heavy with the scent of the Texas earth. The master had retired to his grand house, drunk from the day's indulgence, smug in his power. He slept, believing himself untouchable, surrounded by his wealth, guarded by walls built from profit carved out of broken backs. Cora moved in silence. In her hand, she carried the means of her revenge. The tools she had gathered, the fire she had prepared. She stepped into the house she had been forced to clean 1,000 times, but tonight she entered not as a servant, but as an executioner. She began in the lower rooms. Oil was spilled across wooden floors, onto curtains that swayed lightly in the night breeze. Drapes, dry with dust, soaked the flame's promise. With flint, she sparked the first fire. The kindling hissed, then caught, and soon the room began to glow orange. She moved quickly, feeding fire to corner after corner, until the mansion itself became a furnace. The master awoke, coughing, choking on smoke. He stumbled to his door, only to find flames already climbing the walls. He shouted, cursed, pounded his fists against the wood. His voice carried through the night, but the fire roared louder. The house became chaos. Beams groaning, glass shattering, heat swelling, until the walls themselves seemed to scream. And in that chaos, Cora stood outside, watching. Every cry from within was another echo of her son's cry the day he was stolen. Every desperate plea was a reflection of the pleas she had once made. Please ignored. Please mocked. Now justice answered. The Colonel! The man who had sold her child, who had treated her like an animal, who had built his empire on pain, was trapped. No overseer could save him. No wealth could shield him. The fire climbed, the roof cracked, and his screams faltered, swallowed by smoke and flame. Cora's eyes did not waver. She felt grief. She felt rage. She felt the weight of her son's absence. And in that moment, she felt justice. The mansion collapsed inward, a tower of flame crumbling into ash. The master who thought himself immortal had been reduced to smoke. By dawn, the plantation was unrecognizable. The grand house, once a symbol of dominance, stood as little more than blackened ruins. Ash drifted in the wind, carrying the smell of death across the fields. The enslaved whispered among themselves. Some were terrified, fearing brutal reprisals. Others felt a quiet surge of pride, a hidden strength, knowing that one of their own had struck back in a way none thought possible. The overseers searched for answers. Was it an accident? A lantern tipped? Or was it rebellion? Whispers pointed to Cora, but history is unclear on what happened next. Some say she was captured quickly, beaten, and executed in the most brutal of ways. A warning to others who might dare follow her path. Others suggest she vanished into the night, carried away by the chaos, perhaps finding her way to maroon communities hidden in swamps, perhaps slipping across borders to freedom. But regardless of her fate, her act lived on. Slaveholders spoke of her in fear, reminding one another that even the most loyal enslaved could turn into destroyers. Among the enslaved, her story became legend. Mothers whispered her name in the dark, a tale of a woman who avenged the loss of her child with fire. Cora's revenge carried a symbolic weight that history cannot erase. She turned a plantation's grandest house into a grave. She turned a master's sense of power into a coffin of ash. And she did it not for herself alone, but for the son stolen from her arms. For every enslaved mother who had felt that same ripping pain, this was Cora's story. A mother in Texas who, in 1857, lost her son to the cruelty of slavery and answered with fire. A mansion burned, a master died, and her act became a whispered legend of resistance. But hers is only one of countless untold stories. For every Cora, there were others. Mothers, fathers, children, whose voices were silenced, whose vengeance was never recorded, whose pain remains hidden beneath the soil of plantations. Together, these stories remind us of a truth too often buried. The enslaved did not suffer quietly. They resisted. They fought. They burned. This was Cora's story. A mother's pain that ignited a night of vengeance. But hers is only one of countless untold slave stories. If you want more hidden narratives, watch this playlist here. And don't forget to subscribe. These voices deserve to be remembered.